Uh-oh.
Come true of being a dad with the dream to be of entrepreneurship, you're presented with a world of possibilities along with a world of challenges. Join Joel Lewis as he interviews successful entrepreneur dads sharing how they made it work from the start. This is Startup Dad HQ.
Hello, welcome to Startup Dad Headquarters, where we're exploring the intersection between fatherhood, entrepreneurship, and life. I am your host, Joel Lewis, and today, Startup Dad's Backstage, I'm really excited to have on the show Marc Mawhinney. Marc is a lifelong entrepreneur who began his coaching business after starting several companies, including one that grew to 100 employees. His passion and specialty is helping other coaches build successful businesses by defining their target markets. That is so important. Implementing systems to better manage their time and make more sales. He launched the Natural Born Coaches podcast. This is how Marc and I met, a daily podcast where he interviews successful coaches to help support the worldwide coaching community. The show became an immediate hit, making it into the iTunes New and Noteworthy category in its first week of release and greatly exceeding the average downloads for new episodes. The show can be found at www.naturalborncoaches.com. Actually, I don't even know why I said the www. I don't even know if people say that anymore. But naturalborncoaches.com. And Marc is on a mission to help coaches spread their message and their value to as many people as possible. Marc, really excited to have you on the show. Welcome to Startup Dad Headquarters.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Joel.
Yeah, definitely. So I told the audience a little bit about you. Please take a second. Let us know what you have going on right now with your business and what's really exciting you with Natural Born Coaches.
Yeah, I'm in the early stages of the podcast launch, and I guess you know all about that. It's been keeping me busy where it's a daily podcast, and it launched on November 17th, so we're still relatively new in the podcasting world, but having a good time with it and getting a lot of good feedback from coaches too. You know, it's really cool to have coaches say that they listen to the show every day, that they start their day, and so on. So it's been a lot of fun doing that, and I think we're doing a good job helping coaches build stronger businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I listen to, I'm not a coach as of yet, but, that's one of the directions that I want to head down to and head down with my startup dad journey. And I listened to a couple of episodes and I was blown away. And you have some fantastic guests that you're bringing onto the show with tons of experience. So you definitely have your idea, your target audience figured out, and the guests that you're bringing in are also bringing in tons of value.
Yeah, there's been some really good guests that we've had on, Joel, like people who I've followed for years and have been really, who've helped my life. So it's been a neat journey to connect with people that have had an influence on me, and then meeting new people, and the whole world's opened up here with podcasting, meeting people like yourself with what you're doing. I've listened to your show, and it's great just to learn and grow that way.
Yeah, can you, I haven't talked about this as of yet. Like, I've had a couple of guests who also are podcasters, and I haven't really explained to the audience what is podcasting exactly. How do you monetize a podcast, and can you explain to us how you're approaching it? Because every podcast is different. I think for the most part, the audience knows what a podcast is. It's an audio, audio conversation. Sometimes it's just a person just talking by themselves. But how do you take that your podcast, Natural Born Coaches, and implement that into your business?
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of different ways to monetize it, so it really depends on what the actual host's goal is. I mean, with my podcast, the way that I monetize is it's a great way to meet potential clients, that listen to the show every day and get value from there. So, if you're a coach or if you're a speaker or author, anything, then that's the best way to do it, is to get that direct connection with people who could hire you. But besides that, I mean, there's sponsorship opportunities. I just got 2 new sponsors for the show, which is where we're capping it at 2 per show because we don't want a show full of ads. People wouldn't want to listen to that. So we got our first few sponsors here in the last week, and those they're going to be into the new shows. And I mean, there's other things that you can do as well, but it's a very fine line. You don't want to have your podcast too commercialized because I think the whole point of the podcast is to give that value, to put the value out there, and then you get the benefits coming back. But you don't want a podcast, just like a website, if it was filled with tons of ads and everything else and there wasn't the valuable content, then it's going to be hard to grow it. So it's a bit of a balancing act that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that differentiate a podcast from someone listening to talk radio is that they don't have to necessarily deal with all those ads. But it's definitely a fine line because you do have to pay for you have to pay the bills, right? And podcasting it's not expensive, but it's still not completely free from the host standpoint. Right?
Yeah, there is definitely an investment there. Like I'll give you an example. I just hired an editor just to get help with that because being a daily podcast, I was getting swamped with the editing. And then that was keeping me away from content creation and working with clients and doing the other things that I have to do to grow my business. So you can get into podcasting relatively inexpensively, but there is still going to be some expenses there if you want to do a good job with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't even imagine daily. I initially, when I decided to come out with my podcast, it was going to be 5 days a week. And that was, I thought I could do it. I still work, my 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And probably 2 weeks before I launched, I was like, you know what, 5 days a week might not be doable. So I switched to 3 days a week.
Yeah.
Because like you said, the editing and creating the show notes and those things do take a lot of time. I do have a virtual assistant now, my show notes, and I've been working with someone with the editing, but it hasn't been perfect yet because I'm not ahead of schedule. Like I need to be ahead of schedule in order for the virtual assistant to get the audio. So that's actually a she, so she can do the editing and everything like that. But like the startup dads know, for me so far, it's been I'm editing the show like hours before the show comes out.
Yes. Speaking of audio there, I can hear you better with the headset. Yeah, I agree, Joel. Like, I mean, my editing is still going to take probably per show about an hour to an hour and a half when I factor in the show notes and everything to do with the website. But that's down from about 3 hours per show previously, which I was doing. So having the company editing, 317 Sound Design is who's doing my editing. I'll put a quick shout out for them because Jen Eds has been A1. She's been a great help and she's taken a big burden off of me. So but you know what? It's in life. If you want anything and you want to have success, and you know what it's like. You got to put the effort in. So we can't complain.
Yeah, and I think it's and we're spending some time on this, but definitely get into it for a second. But I've had a couple of guests who are podcasters, so I think it's important that I spend a little bit of time talking about this for the audience.
Exactly.
But I think it is important because I've gotten a lot of feedback that the quality of my show is really, really good, and that's because I'm spending 3 hours or so to edit the show. And you're starting to see, I don't know about you, but you're starting to see some podcasts now, the startup podcast. There's that other one. I forget. It's like a one day a week. It's almost like listening to an episode of a television show.
Yeah.
And their quality is like amazing. So the level of podcasting is starting to pick up, and for us to be, I don't want to say compete, but basically for us to have listeners that are going to listen to our show, I think we also have to increase the level of quality.
Yeah, I mean, it's a learning curve. Like, I think new podcasters, it's a bit of a balancing act where they want to have good quality audio, but they don't want to delay their launch while they're saving up for the good equipment and for editors and everything else. I mean, I'll give you an example, just kind of a funny story. When I started recording my podcast, I recorded a batch of them to be ready for the November launch. And one thing which I hadn't noticed till someone brought to my attention is with the microphone I was using is quite sensitive, so it was quite a ways away from me, but people listening could say, I could hear you breathing, Mark, and as much as I love Star Wars, I don't want to sound like Darth Vader, when I'm talking to guests, and it wasn't anything like Darth Vader, but they could pick up on that, sound, so what do you do? I just kind of laughed and made a joke about it, and I could pick up on it when I was listening again, and I'm using, it's a Blue Yeti microphone that's quite a ways away from me. I'm like, how the heck can it pick up on that? So my microphone is now back even further. You learn little tricks like that, and that's all part of the game. It's rookie mistake, and you don't let it throw you off your game. You just move on and learn.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have a Blue Yeti as well, and it picks up my air conditioner outside, the compressor.
Yeah.
It's insane. So
Yeah, it's you can't worry too much. You don't want to worry about the mosquito that showed up at the 33-minute mark in 20 seconds or something. Like, some people really get into the editing where they have to zap that out and make sure everything's perfect. And the early stages, I did that too. If a guest gave an or an ah, or they coughed or whatever, you're worried about getting it perfect. And I think it's better to keep it real. Like, you don't want to have it so edited that it takes out every single thing that makes it sound like a normal conversation. So you can feel free to keep this unedited or whatever, and don't worry about making me look bad or sound bad.
absolutely cool. So thank you for taking the time to talk about podcasting with me for a little bit, just to get the audience again to understand what podcasting is and how it's being incorporated into your business. So, Mark, as you know, this is Startup Dad Headquarters, so we're all about the family and, of course, showcasing amazing startup dads like yourself. I was recently inspired by the quote which goes, "No other success can compensate for failure in the home." And I felt that would be a perfect quote to kick off our first segment of the show, which is Family First. I asked you to submit a family fun photo. You submitted a photo of you and your son, and I believe this is Halloween time, so let's take a look at that. Tell us what's going on here. Give us a little bit of backdrop, and this is where we really, and I don't mention this too often. Hopefully the startup dads have listened to some of the older episodes, but this is where we try to make that connection between you and the dad who's kind of like sitting on the sidelines waiting to get in, but doubting whether he can because he has family to take care of.
Yeah, well, this picture was actually taken not too long ago. This was from Halloween of 2014, so it was just recently, and of course the little guy dressed up as Batman. He's addicted to Batman. He loves everything, Batman. And a true story, my first picture actually had me in my Robin tights, but I thought, Joel's not going to want to see me dressed as Robin, so we'll send the one fully clothed now. It's funny because, it was a great time walking around the neighborhood to the other houses and everything else, but this was right around the time where I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off, getting ready for the podcast launch, because it was just a few weeks before launch. So that you probably can't see it in that picture, but it was nice to take a break from all the hustle and bustle of launching the podcast and coaching and everything, and have a couple hours where I could just take the little guy out and you relive your childhood, right? Going door to door, trick or treating and everything else. So it was a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for Halloween we have some guests over. Actually, one of my interviews. The interview started late, and we were having a Halloween party. This was this year, and the people started showing up, and you started hearing the noise. Talking about sound quality, right?
Yeah.
Started hearing the noise of people coming in, but just kept it human, kept it honest. Say, hey, we're about to start a party, so you're gonna hear some noise. During the editing, I edited out some of the sound, but it's bound to be in there. So
yeah.
And so, Mark, what does fatherhood mean to you?
Well, it's tough to answer that question in kind of a sound bite, but I mean, I'll do my best. For me, being a father is it's the best feeling in the world, and I mean, I know that sounds cliche, and other guests have probably said that, but my life totally changed for the better when my son was born. He's a little over 6 years old now. He's just not too long into his elementary school career. So before I was a father, everything was me, and it was all business. Like you mentioned in the intro, I was in real estate for years and constantly had a phone up to my ear and hardly took time to sleep, and it was just all very focused on that business. And I can remember someone at that time, a coworker had another agent with the company had a newborn. And I just remember thinking at the time, I was probably 25 at the time, I thought, oh my God, who would want to have a kid, you know? Because you couldn't work, you know, if you had a kid, you couldn't do as much work as you wanted. And it sounds funny to say that now that I'm a father and you wouldn't trade it for the world, but it really does shift your perspective. And as an entrepreneur, some entrepreneurs are nervous about having children if they haven't yet. They're like, well, we better wait. I'm too busy. It's going to hurt, you know, with what I'm doing with business. But I've said before, having a child is probably the best motivation that you could have as an entrepreneur, because you're not going to slack off and you're not going to give it less than 100% when you know that you have a child that's depending on you to bring home the bacon. You know, you have to feed them. So I think it's the best motivation that you could have as an entrepreneur to have children.
Yeah, I think it is a two sides to that coin. It's the motivation, but also at times the people fear that, you know, if with the family I can't take the sleep because I won't be able. There's a chance I won't be able to provide for them. You know, I put food on the table.
Definitely, that is the other side of it.
Yeah. So you mentioned, you know, before you having, you know, your son, you know, as a real estate investor, you always had the phone to your ear. How are you balancing that now with your business? Like you said, to kind of take the time to with this Halloween to, you know, just to pull yourself away, knowing that you have the podcast that's about to launch, and there's so many things to do, because as a business owner or as an entrepreneur, you're the CEO, you're the marketer, you're the advertiser, you're everything under the sun, and it always seems like there's something to do, right? Every minute, every hour, there's something to do. So how are you balancing that and pulling yourself away?
Yeah, I mean it's still difficult, but to tell you the truth, it's easier in my coaching life than it would have been in real estate, because when I was in real estate, I was dealing with a ton of clients. You know, I had 100, 150 listings and just going nonstop, and there was always a fire to put out, or there was clients that had to be met, and your phone's going off the hook and everything else. And part of the reason I like coaching, in addition to be able to impact people's lives, is it's much more manageable. Like, you're dealing with a client where you set the expectations that, okay, we're going to talk weekly. I usually keep my appointments the same time, same day, every week, so we have a set appointment. And then there's work in between, but you're not talking to somebody 15 times a day, you know, and I would probably drive them nuts, and they'd drive me nuts if we're going back and forth that much. So it's a little different than when you're dealing with an anxious home seller that needs to get their home sold, and they're calling you nonstop because they want to know if there's anything going on with the sale. With coaching, you can set your schedule better. So it's still a lot of work, like you mentioned. You're wearing a bunch of different hats, but you can still manage. Big thing for me is I'm an early riser. Like, I'm up at 5 a.m. You know, Robin Sharma talks about the 5 a.m. club. I'm in the 5 a.m. or the 4:45 club sometimes too, and I'm a bit of a night owl, working pretty late at times too. So I pick my spots. You know, like, I'll get the little guy to bed, and then I'll work after he's in bed, get a couple good hours in there as well. And it's all about prioritizing. You know, I'm not a big TV watcher. You know, I'm not into a lot of stuff that would waste time that way. It's my son, you know, my girlfriend, and my business are in there, and I work and pick my spots.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And we didn't talk about where you are right now. So you're in Canada, right?
I am, yeah, the great white north here. So,
So
yeah.
what's your time zone? What time is it there right now?
I'm in the strangest time zone. We're in the Atlantic time zone, there's not a lot of place in the Atlantic time zone. It's an hour later than Eastern time zone, which makes it very confusing dealing with clients all over. But I'm in New Brunswick, Canada, so we're the province that borders Maine, and so we're in that northeastern part. We have a lot in common with the northeastern U.S. So it's a beautiful province. It's not a huge province. There's about 750, 800,000 people for a province, which is comparable to what you'd consider a state. So we're basically, it would be like a small state.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in Massachusetts, so I know.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you know all about winters and everything else.
Oh yeah, we're getting snow right now, so it's coming.
See, I don't feel too bad talking to you, but I had a couple interviews recently with people in California and Florida and all these other places, and I'm talking about our, you know, weather that we're going through, and they're talking about, you know, the high temperatures and everything. You just feel like getting off the line with them.
Exactly. No, I'm going through the same things you're going through, the cold nor'easters and the snow and the ice storms and all that kind of stuff.
Well, see, there's a perfect example or excuse to get a lot of work done in the winter. If you're in Massachusetts or New Brunswick or anywhere up in this part of the world, there's not a lot of incentive to go out and outdoors, so you can just stay inside and podcast and business plan.
Right. Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, Mark, it sounds like you mentioned you have your son, you have your girlfriend. So you're very involved in with the day-to-day activities of your son's life, right?
Well, I mean, my situation's a little different. I mean, I'll step back a little bit. When I went through the business closure in 2009, obviously a very stressful time. Like I had just went through a period of 10 years where nothing went wrong. Like every single thing I did was everything I touched turned to gold, and it seemed like I could do no wrong. So when 2009 happened and everything collapsed, I just got beat up really bad, by the media and by a lot of people in my local market. And, it's never fun to go through a business closure, and there's people that are owed money, and there's controversy and everything else. So there was a lot of stress there with my son's mother. We're divorced now, and we separated a few years after that closure, and that had a big part to do with it. Obviously, with going through all that. So your show is interesting to me because a lot of the fears that your listeners have, I've probably gone through them. I'm the poster child for a lot of that when you're dealing with business closure, bankruptcy, divorce, and everything. I mean, that being said, my ex-wife and I get along great. It's we get along very well. She's with someone new, I'm with someone new. No issues whatsoever with our son, and it's worked out very well for him. So I think the lesson to be taken there is I wouldn't want anyone else to go through it, but it means it's not the end of the world if you go through some of these things like a business closure or family separation. I'm still alive. I'm happy. You can still make it work despite all the heartache and trouble you go through at the time.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. And I definitely have if you don't mind, I definitely have a couple of questions probably later on in the show that I'd like to ask
Yeah,
about
please go right ahead.
the business closure. Yeah. So, Mark, now I always stumble a little bit. So I worked last night. So full disclosure, I worked last night. I slept 3 hours, and then we started.
You need one of these Red Bulls.
That's right. I'm trying to sneak in my coffee so that it doesn't, I don't have to edit out me gulping and all that kind of stuff later on.
Yeah, I hope there's no rules against plugging Red Bull on your show there. Maybe you can get them as a sponsor.
Right. That's right. I'll try to work on that. That'd be awesome. Red Bull, proud sponsor of Startup Dad Headquarters.
Startup Dad gives you wings, yeah. Startup Dad Headquarters.
I like that. That's awesome.
Yeah, feel free to take it,
Yeah, that'll be my pitch. That'll be my pitch to them.
Yeah.
So, Mark, now that we know a bit more about you and what you have going on right now, and with this being Startup Dad Headquarters, it's time we talk about your start. Like I like to refer to this as the true Startup Dad story of our show. One of my favorite quotes is the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Please take us back to the initial steps of your Startup Dad journey.
Well, like I mentioned before, my startup really came out of the ashes of the previous business closure, where everything had happened with real estate. I was just burnt out, like a lot of people, with everything going on with the real estate markets around the world in the last 5 years or roughly. I was just done. I had spent my whole adult life in real estate, and I had a good time, made money and learned a lot, but I just hit a point where I thought, you know what, I don't want to be 65 or 70 years old and dealing with this stuff, I've kind of been there, did it, done it, and it's time to move on. Where the whole coaching thing came from was I was helped by several mentors and people that I respect when I was going through a business closure, stepped up and basically, sat me down, talked with me, let me know that it wasn't the end of the world, and they had been through some similar things themselves as well. So that was instrumental to getting me through those tough times. And when I stepped back and thought, okay, what's my next entrepreneurial journey, I thought I would love to be able to help other people as well. And in that time, between when the business had closed and launched coaching, I was unofficially coaching because I was getting calls and emails and things from other business owners who were going through similar things, and they had heard about what happened to me because, it's a small province here. Everyone knows everyone basically, and they all knew with the media and everything else what I went through. So it was kind of interesting. I was hearing from other entrepreneurs. They're like, Mark, I'm going through this. I have to close my business, or I'm thinking about closing it. What do I do? And I realized I really liked the role of coaching and helping other people. So that's where the whole coaching thing had come from. I'd been coaching all my life with my employees and salespeople, and then after that closure, but then it was just a matter of making it official with the launch.
Yeah, so just to take a step back, so you started the business, or correct me if I'm wrong, 1999?
2000 was when I got into real estate. So I was about 21, 22 years old, 21, yeah.
Okay. And like, how did you come up? I mean, I'm 20, 21. That's very early. I know you didn't have your son yet. We're gonna definitely want to get into that part because this is Startup Dad. So, but how did you come up with the idea of starting your own real estate business at such a young age? I mean, at the age of 20, I barely knew what the heck I wanted to do.
Yeah, it was interesting. It wasn't like I got out of diapers and was a kid and dreaming about getting into real estate. Like some people really enjoy all that stuff. They enjoy the whole process of seeing how homes are built. And they like looking at different kitchens and all that. And it wasn't like that for me. I read Think and Grow Rich when I was in high school, of course, Napoleon Hill, and that was the first personal development book that I'd ever read, and it just opened my mind and opened my eyes, to that there was more to life than working 9 to 5 and at a job that you hate, and you can go out and build something that you've dreamt of and something you could be successful with. So that really pumped me up in high school, and I went to university, got my degree in political science, but I really had no desire to be a politician. It's as much that you go through as entrepreneurs, I don't think I'd want to go through what politicians do. So I really, getting out of university, thought I want to go into business for myself, and what am I going to go into business doing? And real estate just sort of popped up. I saw an ad, a company was hiring, because of course real estate companies are always hiring, and I was 21 at the time. And I looked about probably 15 years old. Like, I looked young, I've got some gray hairs now with everything that went on, and that's why I got the beard. But yeah, so I got started with real estate, and I'm sure people probably thought I was, the paper boy coming up to the front door or whatever when I was showing up. But it went really well. It got off to a quick start. I started adding people to my team. So it started with a couple people being with me as part of my team, and then it was 10 or 15 people, and just kept growing from there till I launched my own brokerage and had the 100 people that you were referencing.
Okay, so now you have a brick and mortar business. You have employees, so you're handling payroll and all that kind of. These were full-time employees; they weren't contractors.
Yeah, well, I guess technically the agents would be independent contractors, and but yeah, we had a lot of employees, and I had some other businesses working under the roof. I had a property management company, a mortgage business, lawn care, a few things that were real estate related to help with synergy.
Okay, and so now 2009 comes around, so your son is now a year old.
Yeah, he was about a year old. Yeah.
Well, in 2008. So what tell us before the crash, how did things change a little bit not a little bit, how did things change once your son came around? Because now like we were talking about earlier, you had the real estate business where you had to be present, you had to talk to clients and all this stuff, and you have a newborn. So how did that work out?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting, like, not trying to get a pat on the back here, but I got up quite a bit at nighttime when he was crying and things like that, because I was always the type, I said, when my son's born, I don't want to just shove it all on his mother, and I want to be involved, and that was important to me. So the summer of 2008, when he was born in June of 2008, that summer I was basically just a zombie, because I wasn't getting any sleep, but you know what, I was having a ball, it was a good time. And I can remember people just referencing, like, oh my God, take a few days off, and so I was trying to juggle everything with everything going on with real estate and with my little guy as well. But I think overall I probably managed the best that I could between the two of them. And his mother's very involved; she's great, with them. And I'm not trying to suggest that I was doing all the work. It was still, I was focusing on business, but I did try to play an active role with him as a baby.
Yeah, and I think it's not, like you said, it's not pat on the back, but this is this is one of the core uh, core and this is the lack of sleep right here. This this is one of the core focuses of Startup Dad, right?
Yeah,
Startup Dad is I want to talk to dads. I want to interview dads who are involved, right? Who
yeah.
are present, waking up in the middle of the night, helping mom out. Obviously, we're not doing nearly as much as mom is, but it's a completely different scenario than
Mm.
50 years ago when dad wasn't involved at all. So, and I think you're starting to see that more and more. I don't know. I don't want to say to trend, but you're seeing dads being more engaged. You're starting to see more stay-at-home dads. There's even talk about paternity leave and stuff. I know you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff over in Canada, but here in the States, there's talk about men getting paternity leave because with my three girls, for every single one, I was there. I was in the hospital. I was
Mm.
involved. So I was getting very very little sleep, like you mentioned in your situation. So that we definitely want to showcase amazing startup dads like yourself. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, and I think the mothers deserve a lot of credit. And to being totally candid, for me, business was a little bit of an escape. If I had to be in the house 24/7 changing diapers and crying and stuff, like our little guy was colicky, and you had to learn how to swaddle him. And I can remember you reminded me of Hannibal Lecter. We had him in the straight jacket with the soother, and if the soother even moved a little bit, he would flip out. So I actually probably got a bit of a break going to do the real estate thing or whatever, like, okay, I'll be back in 8 hours. But yeah,
It looks like you froze up a little bit.
yeah, no, sorry, there we go.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely mom gets all the credit. It's a full-time job being mom and being at home, and there isn't that adult interaction that we get when we do go to work and that escape time away from the crying and all that kind of stuff. So
Oh, it's hard, yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
I'm thinking for Mother's Day, I might, and I'll see how maybe I'll put some feelers out there. But I'm thinking for Mother's Day, I do something. I'm not Mother's Day, the month, right? Is it
Yep.
March? Yeah, March, right? Yes, I hope it's March. I hope I'm right. So for March, doing something focused on moms during that time frame. So we'll see how that works out.
Okay.
So now what my question was, all right. So you take us to 2009. Your son was born, and then the crash occurs. So you had basically the home market economy basically exploded. Uh, how did things, we talk about failure going on in, later in the show, but tell us what was the situation and how did that all pan out?
Yeah, I mean, I was in a tough spot in 2008 because my team was really rolling. Like we were just doing a ton of sales, we were growing and everything else. But the problem that I had was I was still under a company umbrella, and I was paying a fortune in terms of parts of our commission to the parent company, even though we had our own separate office and we handled pretty much everything with it. So I had to look at it and say, okay, do I stay in this arrangement where, we're paying $250,000 a year in royalties, and nothing against the company, they're a great company, but are we getting that much back from it? So I was in that situation where I said, okay, do I stay like this where I'm not totally happy with it, or do I launch? And the problem with the launch was we knew everything that went on in the U.S. in 2008 with the crash. Canada is a little bit different. Like we didn't go through quite the shock that your economy went through. We felt it obviously because the U.S. is such a huge neighbor and part of our economy, but it wasn't like everything crashed and I said January 1st, 2009, oh, okay, let's go out and let's start a business. I don't think anybody anticipated the market really did slow down, but it took longer to reach our neck of the woods, and it still hasn't recuperated. The market that I was selling in just recently, there's been media reports are having the worst market in 30 years. Foreclosures are through the roof. Things aren't selling. You're seeing signs sitting up for a long time. So I didn't anticipate any of that, but the last 5 years have been rough on that market. Seems to have gotten progressively worse. with it. So I launched just because, I felt with our market share, our momentum, and everything else that we could get through that. And like I mentioned before, I was also in a situation where I had never experienced any failure. Like I felt like, hey, I could do no wrong. I'm Superman. And there's that confidence there that all entrepreneurs want to have. But unfortunately for me, I think it went from confidence to overconfidence. It's sometimes there's such thing as maybe a little too much confidence, and you're buying into the hype, and that was my problem. I just it had grown so after it was a lot of work, but we hadn't had any stumbles, and it had gone so well that I thought, well, it's going to go well when I launch, of course.
Yeah. So now you go through the closure in 2009. How do you take us through where does natural born culture start to come into the
Well, I went through the closure in 2009, which was stressful enough, and then just for good measure, I went through another business flop a couple years later, because after the closure in 2009, I got into flipping houses more and more the investment side of real estate, because I'd always wanted to do more of that, but I was so busy as a real estate agent and broker that I just didn't have the time. Now that was probably, it was a bad move, a bad time to get into that, because that was right when the market was really starting to dive, and that just didn't work. The model was wrong, for the market. The interest rates were too high. It was taking too long for properties to get fixed up and to sell, and it just didn't work. So that was in 2012 when I decided I'm just done with real estate. I'm pulling out of it, and that's when it went into the coaching end of it. A big reason why was I was always big on personal development. That helped get me through those two failures. And I thought, what, going forward, whatever I do, I want it to be in the personal development field, because I just that's really my passion, more so than, say, real estate was. Like, I've always had a personal development background and reading personal development books and everything else. So that was really the birth of it after 2012.
Okay. Now, at one point, did you 2009 closure, 2000 you go into the flipping houses, failure there. At one point, did you just ever think about going and getting a corporate job? Because at this point, you haven't worked a corporate job. I mean, your business, you were hiring employees and you were building a pretty substantial size business with 100 employees. But did you ever consider taking your political science degree and going to get a job somewhere in government?
Well, no, not government. That being said, I mean, I have taken on different a sales position with a telecommunications company up this way that I'm still involved with somewhat, easing out of it now that I'm getting busier on the coaching end. So it's a position that offers flexibility, and it's great for my coaching. But that being said, it's been more and more the coaching now with everything going on. And I think that is an important lesson for dads that are thinking about starting businesses, is you don't have to jump from your 9-to-5 job right away to going after this big scary dream. Like, you can ease yourself into it if you, like you mentioned, where you're doing some other work on the side and stuff. You've got a ton of hours in the run of a week, even if you're working a 40-hour job and, you've got to sleep and other things. You could still probably squeeze, upwards of 70 hours or more, 70 to 80 hours out of that 168 hours to build something else. So that's really how I started with coaching, was building it more on the side and then built from there. And that's how I'd encourage people go about doing it, rather than the big scary leap is, okay, where can you do it in the mornings, evenings, weekends, off hours, and then perfect it and work out the kinks and then make the jump.
Yeah, definitely. You talked about personal development, and one of the things that kind of kept you moving forward is the fact that you're big into personal development. And there's a quote by Will Smith that goes, just decide what it's going to be, just decide what it's going to be, who you're going to be, and how you're going to do it. Just decide, and from that point, the universe is going to get out of your way. Tell us, how did you make the decision, with all the personal development books that you've been reading, how did you make the decision to say, I'm going to go again and try this a third time, right, with natural development?
I mean, it's, I think if you're an entrepreneur, it's in your DNA. And there may be times when that flame's flickering just a little bit down in the gut. It's not like a big fire, but it's always there. And for me, I know I'm an entrepreneur, and I always will be. So it doesn't matter if I fail 1 time, 5 times, 10 times. I'm just going to keep, bouncing back up. I have to do it because, like I said, it's in my whole DNA. So I think for me, part of it was positive thinking is great, but part of what motivated me as well was there was some anger. That everything that had been going on, I've been kicked around. I'd had people calling you every name in the book, and I thought, what, this is my way to flip the middle finger, and I'm going to keep going in life. I'm not going to stay. You can't really please a lot of your haters. If you're lying in a ditch doing nothing, they're going to complain. If you're out taking over the world, they're going to complain. So you just have to forget about trying to please them and just do what makes you happy. And for me, coaching and helping people build their businesses makes me happy.
Yeah, yeah. I think, Les Brown quote where he says, one way to one way. I'm gonna mess up the quote, but basically it says one way to get over those haters is massive success, right?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
that's the best revenge.
Right, exactly. The best. Right.
Yeah.
What does you talked about entrepreneurship being in your DNA? What does entrepreneurship mean to you?
And sorry, cut out for a second there, Joel. I got the first part.
Okay, you talked about
Yeah.
entrepreneurship being in your DNA. So tell us, what does entrepreneurship mean to you?
I think entrepreneurship for me is just the ability to create something that you're proud of, and I think creation's a big part of entrepreneurship. Donald Trump talks about that, and I believe it was the Art of the Deal with his first book. He basically compares business and entrepreneurship to being like an artist that's painting this great masterpiece, and that's how he views deal making and everything else. And I think there's something powerful about knowing that you're building something that's going to survive after you're gone, something that you can hand down to your children if they want to go that path later in life, and that's something that's very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I hear a lot is legacy, the word legacy, right?
Yes.
Wanting to leave a legacy for yourself, right? Something that people remember you by. There's a poem that I really love. It's called The Dash, where basically it says that some people will remember on your tombstone. Some people will remember the day you were born. Some people will remember the day you died. But most people will remember your dash, right? That dash.
Mm.
So leaving that legacy where people actually remember who you are, but also leave your legacy is also your children, right? So leave
Yes.
for your children that you built for them. So definitely.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, a big motivation too is our government's probably pretty similar to yours in the U.S. In terms of I really don't want to leave my future in the hands of government because God only knows, the economic situation, what it's going to look like in 20, 30 years or so. It's a little scary when you look at world governments and trillions of dollars with debt and throwing things around and everything else. So the powerful thing for entrepreneurs is you're creating your own economy. Grant Cardone talks about that, and a lot of speakers. And I think there's something powerful about that. You're saying, you know what, I'm not relying on anyone else. I'm relying on myself, and I'm going to build something for me and for my family.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mark, we're over the halfway point, and this is now where we head into the next segment, which I call Real Dads, Real Talk. This is where we go deep, and I ask a series of tough questions that we just can't skip over. Are you ready for this?
Can I phone a friend or no? So like,
No phoning a friend
do I
here.
get any lifelines or no? Okay, I'm good.
Cool. Now, we've talked about failure, doubt, and fear. We talked about failure a couple of times, but for this one, I want to ask a little bit different, and I hope you don't mind. But in the your first business, you said that the 2008, 2009, the real estate business, it led to a lot of stress in your personal life and in your marriage. Can you tell me like how? And this is the first time I'm asking this question, so I'm trying to figure out how to word it, properly. But I think it's important, and if you don't mind answering it, like, what do you think? Because one of the fears is I'm going to lose my family, right?
Mm.
Starting my own business, I'm going to lose my family. What do you think caused it? What do you think you could have done differently? If you were doing the coaching business, would it have been different than the real estate business? that you were running at the time?
Yeah, I mean it's obviously it's a stressful time when you're going through a business closure, and unfortunately with family members, even if they're not actively involved in the business, they are. They're and with my ex-wife, she for years she did help me build the business up. She did a lot of the behind the scenes, helping to manage the office and everything else. Now she hadn't been involved since she was probably 7, 8 months pregnant with our son. So there had been, a year or two that she hadn't been involved, but she was still really she was involved when you look at how an entrepreneur's marriage, so the wife's part of the business, whether they're officially or not. The difficulty we had, I think, was it wasn't a case where the business closed and it was a day later, we decided to split. There was a period of probably 2 years in between or so that we were trying to make it work. But the problem with an entrepreneur when you go through a business closure is that stress is going to affect the marriage, and regardless of how strong a marriage is. We were together for 13 years roughly or so, and didn't have any real bumps in the road that way. But it was just a case of people changing too, because I think with everything happening, my ex-wife thought, what, I don't want to have a husband that's a crazy entrepreneur that's going through all this stuff. She wanted to have a quieter life, and she didn't want someone that had a phone to his ear all the time and everything else, and dealing with all this, ups and downs and controversies and all that other stuff. So never once did I blame her. I thought, what, I probably wouldn't want to be married to me either. It's a stressful time. It's tough. You need a person that's looking for that, I think, to be involved with that, an entrepreneur when it comes to that. So, everything did work out fine, and that's the lesson to your listeners is it sounds horrible when you think about a family splitting up, but at the end of the day, we get along great now. She's doing her thing, I'm doing mine. We get along great for our little guy's sake, and it all worked out that way. So I'm not the type of person, I don't think she is either, that you want to stay in a situation where you're fighting in front of your children, or if you're not 100% happy. There's a lot of people hang on to a marriage years and years after they probably should have quit, and I'm not a quitter, but at some point you have to look and say, what are you doing, and if neither of us are happy, it's time to move on.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer.
Yeah, no problem.
And so I guess my follow-up question to that is, so you have this real estate business, then you did the flipping business. What are you doing differently with natural-born coaches to give you more security, right? Because we talked about legacy. We talked eventually you have to pay for college, right? You have a girlfriend right now, and she probably wants some level of everyone wants some level of security in terms of deciding if you're going to take that next step and get married. What are you doing differently with natural? What is different with the business model of natural-born coaches that wasn't there with the other two?
The biggest difference with my business now is I don't have this huge crushing overhead that's hanging over my head at all times. With the real estate brokerage, we were doing a ton of sales, and our market share was great and everything else, but it was almost like you're on a hamster wheel, because we had, this huge, we actually had 2 offices, to house all these agents in 2 different markets, and you had your advertising where you're spending a fortune in advertising and your signage and everything else, and it meant that there wasn't a month where you could take your foot off the gas and just sort of relax. You had to always keep pushing and pushing. And in the same way when it came to the flipping businesses, you've got these houses that are once again hanging over your head, and you've got all these deadlines, and you've got every day the interest is piling up on properties and everything else. So what I realized with real estate is it's not always the best. Shouldn't say it's not a great business or whatever, but I got advice from a mentor before, and I should probably listen to him. He said, in real estate, if you want to make money, just keep selling. Don't get into the other stuff. And I think there's some truth in that. When you're a salesperson with real estate, you don't have as much overhead. You've got still some things like some advertised stuff, but you're not suddenly worrying about 50 or 100 people who are relying on you for their way of life. So the biggest difference now with coaching is, it's me. I'm like you, virtual assistants that are helping me out, but it's not like I'm actually paying to put a roof over their head and worrying about all the other stuff. Like they're here in an office with me, which works out great. So I've gotten away from that model where it's a lot of bricks and mortar and a lot of responsibility that way. Now I'm getting to keep more of every dollar that I'm earning.
So now I'm a startup dad listening, and I have a brick and mortar business right now. What would you say to that startup dad? How if you were still running your real estate business right now, from 2009 to 2014, what would you have done differently, maybe to add some? Would there have been a way to potentially put more security around that business?
I mean, there's always ways looking back and playing Monday morning quarterback, but to be honest, I crunched the numbers and looked at things, and the way that the market ended up going, and when I factored in where the sales would be and everything, it would still be a difficult model to make work, because part of the problem I had is with my team, I was covering the expenses like MLS dues and their advertising and signage. Everything was more of a team model than the independent models that you see in a lot of places, where the agent basically, gets a desk and they get the business card with the company's name, and that's it. And then there's no support. With us, part of the problem that we had, it was great in 2004 to 2008 when we had a smaller team. When you have a team of 10 or 15 people, you can make that work. But when you're suddenly growing up to upwards of 100 people, then that model doesn't work as well. So I, not to suggest I didn't make mistakes, because I made a lot of mistakes, but I think one of them would have probably been trying to pay too much in terms of the agent employee expenses. And you always hear you treat your people well, and they're with you for life and everything like that. And the problem I ran into, and where I got beat up by the media and others a lot, is towards the end of it, I had advanced, with the agent's knowledge, but I had advanced commissions that were due to us down the road a few months, because to keep everything rolling. And when the business closed in August of 2009, we couldn't collect those deals that were closing in September, October, November, and December, because we weren't in business anymore. And our local real estate association didn't have any sort of setup, any sort of fail-safe to collect commissions on our behalf. They basically said, well, we're not dealing with it, we're not going to do anything. So everything was in limbo. And you had the commission advance company now couldn't go after me because I was closed and I was going through bankruptcy, so they were going after the agents attached to those deals. And the agents got paid eventually. It was in March of 2010 that they finally got paid, but there was about 7 months there that was stressful for them, because they're getting chased down by this advance company, and then they're people are thinking I'm off living on an island and stuff, when trust me, I wasn't. It wasn't a lot of fun for me, trying to work through it. I had my life on hold for about 7 months, working with our provincial government to get those commissions released and everything, because I wanted the agents to get paid so everyone would get off my back too, and everyone could move on with their lives. And people did finally get paid, but it was a stressful 7 months or so that people didn't know what was going to go on or what would happen with all those commissions. So it's just a really messy situation. If we were a real estate company that had just a couple deals set to close, then it wouldn't have been a big deal, if it was a small company. But we had high market share, we had a ton of deals set to close, and all this other stuff. So when it did close, and I knew once I found out from the local real estate association that they had no process set up to deal with this, that it was going to be messy.
If you had to do it all over again, would you, and why?
Oh, geez, I would. I don't regret going for it, because if I looked at myself in 2014, 2015 and thought, gee, I should have went for it 5 years ago, and I hadn't, and then I'd spent 5 years doing the same thing, I would have felt like, what, there would have been some regret. Could I have done it? For me, I'm not the type that was content staying for decades doing the same thing. Like, you see some entrepreneurs and some salespeople will hit a level, and then they stay at that level consistently for 40 years. They're just always there, and they never break through it. And I never want to be like that. I always want to try new things, and you know what? Didn't work out, you move on and you do something else, and that's always been my philosophy with it. And I wouldn't have made it to where I'm at today if I hadn't taken risks starting in 2000. I just constantly rolled the dice, and they worked out. And ones later on didn't work out, and now I'm doing other things that are working out. And at the end of the day, I think that you're better off taking risks than playing it safe. And what's the old saying? Like, the ships aren't meant to stay in harbor. They're meant to go out into the ocean.
Right. So two more questions before we go into our final segment. The first one is, can you connect, you mentioned it earlier in the show, can you connect the dots for us in terms of, um, now you have natural born coaches, you were doing real estate, you were flipping houses, how does coaching come out of that? Can you connect the dots for us and show us how you went from a real estate guy to a coaching guy?
Yeah, well, like, after real estate, I sort of stepped back and said, I'm going to take a breather and decide what I want to do, because I hadn't really taken any sort of breaks other than those 7 months I was mentioning where I was dealing with that previous closure. So, with me, it wasn't a case where the next day after real estate I said, I'm going to get into coaching. I started a sales position with a telecommunications company, which it is, and I'm still doing things with them, super flexible, super understanding. They know what I'm doing on the other end, and that gave me a level of support and stability while I was doing the other things with coaching. So you don't have to jump right from one thing into another and make a big splash and a big risk. Like, you can do things by gradually phasing out of one position into your new venture. There's ways to do it, and there's always time to do that as well. There's enough hours in the week if you're smart with the hours that you have. So that's what I basically did, is I had that degree of stability from the sales position, but I had the flexibility to build, like, every free minute was done with coaching, and started to pick up clients that way. And my coaching has even evolved as time's gone on, because originally when I started coaching, I was focusing on entrepreneurs and small business owners. I said, I'm going to cast the net as wide as possible. I'm going to work with any entrepreneur, which you would think would be the best way to do it as a coach. But in reality, I find with coaching, it's better to have more of a niche. To have a target market niche down. So as time went on with the coaching business, I realized that the people I enjoy working with are actually the other coaches, helping them build their businesses and set up their programs and get rolling and everything else. So that's where, as time went on, I said, okay, I'm going to narrow it down and focus on helping other coaches, with their business, and that's going to be my main focus.
And did you go out and get any? Have you gone out and gotten any certifications or anything like that?
Oh, sorry, I missed the first part. Did I get any?
Yeah, did you go out and get any certification, coaching certification?
Well, with certification, I did deal with a few different certification companies in the States that had, basically training and practice clients and so on. But no, I don't have. It's not like I have a certificate hanging up on the wall or diploma. Not to bash. There's great certification. I've had some guests on the show that swear by some of the groups, like there's IPAC and there's the International Coach Federation, and there's some good ones. But coaching isn't the type of thing that you really need to do, like go to take the university class and get that diploma. I think with coaching, your success is more from your own personal experiences and things that you've learned in your life, and then packaging it to clients. So a lot of the coaches I know and deal with actually aren't certified. They prefer not to have a strict paint by numbers. They like to have some flexibility with their coaching.
Yeah, and really what I was trying to get to with that, because I know you mentioned it earlier, was your coaching experience has been built up since you started the real estate business, and you mentioned it earlier in the show that you had 100 employees and you had to manage those employees and you had to coach them through how to become real good sales agents, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been coaching for years. Just I didn't know it unofficially. Since I hired my first employee and team member my second year in real estate, and I was always coaching there. I just didn't define myself as a coach. So I was probably the best training you could get as a coach is managing that many people and trying to help them sell more and everything else.
And so, final question before we jump out of this segment and go into the last segment. I know time is running out now. Can you tell us, tie in the intersection between fatherhood and entrepreneurship? We talked about each individually. can you tie those into a summary statement of how fatherhood and entrepreneurship intersects for you?
Um, well, I think we touched on it earlier with the motivation factor. With my son Gray, he's what drives me, and that's sort of my whole reason for being and whatever I'm doing in business. You know, I'm keeping a picture of him right in the wallet. Anytime I'm feeling like I'm not wanting to work anymore or push it hard, then that's you know, we made a joke earlier about Red Bull, but I think kids are probably the ultimate motivation. You know, they're what gives you wings to. So for me, I think there's a very close connection between being a father and being an entrepreneur, because your business is your baby as well. You know, I'm not trying to say it's the same as your children, obviously, but I know in the past when I went through a business closure, it was almost like the death of a child. There's a mourning period and everything that you have to go through. And I'm always fascinated with the connection between business and family and fatherhood and everything. I think it's real, and that's why I love your show and what you're doing, because I think there's so many things you could explore there with those two topics.
Absolutely. Thank you. So we're entering the final segment of the show. I like to call this the rapid fire handyman segment. And this is where we quickly reach into your toolbox and you provide the startup dad community some really useful tools. I think I missed the name of your son, but what is his son?
His name's just like the color gray. Every time I say gray, people say, "Oh, it's Greg." No, it's Gray. It's Gray. Yeah. So it's Gray.
Great, awesome. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, for the longest time when he was a youngster, whenever someone asked him his name, he would say it's Gray like the color. Right away, he'd say Gray like the color, because so many people said, "Oh, Greg," you know, or whatever. No, Gray like the color.
So in this segment, I like to paint the picture of Gray is basically knocking on your door and basically saying, "Hey, Dad, let's go hang out. Let's go play outside in the snow." And we want to get through these questions really quick so you can go spend some time with him.
Cool.
What is your #1 time management hack or tool?
The best one that I have is my online scheduler, and I'm sure you're finding that as well when you're trying to book interviews and appointments. I use ScheduleOnce, .com. So anytime somebody wants to book, if it's a client booking appointments or consultation, or it's booking an interview for the podcast, and that's what they use. And you don't have to go back and forth 10 times to try to work out a schedule. They see what your openings are, they book one, and it's done.
Yeah, I use ScheduleOnce as well.
Yeah.
It also factors in the time zones and everything.
It does, yeah.
What's one personal habit that you believe attributes to your success as a father and an entrepreneur?
I would say just being persistent, if you could call that a habit. That would be the one theme in my life. Is as an entrepreneur and as a father, you have to almost be like a dog with a bone. You know, you're not letting go. So you run into a wall one place, you're finding a door somewhere else, or a window, or you're crawling over. You have to be persistent. You can't get down on yourself when things don't work out. You just pop back up and find a new way to do it.
What's one way you manage your health?
Manage my health? I think for me, I could probably do better in terms of getting more sleep, but where I'm such an early riser, like 5 o'clock or so, I make sure that I don't. For me, a lot of people say, "How the heck do you do it?" I get generally about 5 to 6 hours sleep, and that's good enough for me. But it means that I'm not out till 2 o'clock in the morning either, because I'm not crazy. I can't go on 3 hours. So some people say, "Oh, what, like 5 or 6 hours? That's considered a lot of sleep." Well, for me, it probably is. The other thing that's important is I stay away from negative, toxic people. If somebody's in my life and they're not contributing to it in a positive way, then I don't have any qualms about just cutting them out, and moving on, because the people that are around you are it's so important that they're supportive of what you're doing, and you can't deal with negative and haters and any of that chatter. You need positive people.
Yeah, I love that answer. Thank you. Knowing what you know now, what's one thing you would have done differently?
I think for me, I would, and it's good advice for any entrepreneur, is always expect your expenses will be higher than you anticipate. Your revenues will probably be lower. So it's good to be positive and optimistic, but you can't have the rose-colored glasses on. And the other thing I would say is in that vein is just because things have gone a certain way up to this point, don't just naturally assume it's going to keep going at that trajectory. Like, you know, in real estate, my business consistently was doubling every year. It was just like crazy, kind of the hockey stick graph type growth. It wasn't like a slow climb. And the problem I had is I got used to that for so many years. I assumed that that would always happen, as crazy as that sounds. That's all I had ever seen. So I would say don't wear the rose-colored glasses as an entrepreneur. Be optimistic, but also have some sort of realism in there as well.
What's one book every startup dad should absolutely read?
Well, I mentioned Think and Grow Rich earlier. That's a book that I think should be required reading. But I actually just read a book I was just introduced to a couple months ago, and I wish I'd read it back in 2009. It's called Thick Face, Black Heart, and there it is right there. It's right on my desk. But it's by Chin-Ning Chu. And it incorporates a lot of Asian business practices for North American audiences. She wrote it back 1992, I believe, in around there. So I found that really interesting. It's without getting into a big long thing about it, it's really showing how you can go about doing your business and not feeling bad about doing some things you know you have to do. Like the thick face, black heart. Thick face basically means that you're impervious to criticism. You're not going to let what anyone says drag you down. So you're going to keep going towards your goal no matter what anyone says. Black heart is basically means that you do what needs to be done. So you make those hard choices. You're not soft-hearted and kind of pussyfooting around. You just do what you have to do, keeping in mind your goals. So that's an excellent book. I'd recommend it. It's a little trickier to find. Like, it may not be at the local bookstore. I ordered mine on Amazon, and it was a little bit of a process getting it. But Thick Face and Black Heart's that book.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll definitely check it out. Hopefully they have it on Audible audio so I can look at it.
Right.
Yeah. So, Mark, this was an amazing interview, and my final question is a little bit long, but usually produces really powerful answers, and here it is. On the other side of this broadcast is a startup dad who at this point is fired up and ready to go. But as soon as the broadcast is over, he will put down his mobile device and life is going to happen. And by next week, he'll find himself right back to the day-to-day minutia. What would you say to that dad to inspire him beyond this broadcast?
I would say listen to Natural Born Coaches podcast. No, just kidding. I had to fit that in. No, the biggest, and that's an interesting question because I've been there. My mind, I tend to, if I don't keep my mind plugged up with good, positive stuff, and that it can tend to, drift towards negative thinking like anybody. So my recommendation for that startup dad is keep your mind busy as much as possible. Don't overthink things. Like, keep it busy with. You mentioned audiobooks. They were a lifesaver for me going through my tough times, because anytime I caught my mind kind of wandering into that negative territory, great, I'll pop on some Les Brown, or I'll pop on some Tony Robbins or whatever. So if it's Audible or watching positive YouTube videos or whatever, basically fill your mind up with that and it worked every single time. I'd listen to one of those classic books or anything personal development, and I was out of that funk and I was just ready and raring to go. So you have to make an effort. Watch that little voice in your head, because if you're not paying attention to it, it's going to turn negative before you even realize it. And just be very cautious of what it's saying and what you're feeding your mind.
Absolutely. Mark, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your startup dad journey and for a truly inspiring episode.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, definitely. Please take a moment, share any final words, and then we'll say goodbye. And also talk about your coaching, the 3 questions that coaches must ask themselves. I know you have some things that you can offer for startup dads who want to go into coaching.
Sure. Well, one thing I'd say, Joel, is I'm hoping people don't get scared off by your interview, because they're probably listening to my story and thinking, oh my God, I'm going to run out and get a 9-to-5 job. What I think is very important to realize is that the worst case scenario, it's never the end of the world, or nothing's life and death. So I've been through some challenges and stuff, and they seem big at the time. But I mean, I look at families going through, like, the husband going off to war, or they're going through health issues and all that stuff, and what they're going through compared to what I went through, I have no right to complain whatsoever. So my advice would be not to get scared off, just to take action and to go after those dreams, and realize if it doesn't work out, then you've at least gotten a very valuable education, and something that you couldn't buy. It's priceless to learn all that going through firsthand. The report that I'm offering on the website, if you go to naturalborncoaches.com and subscribe to our newsletter, it's 3 questions that every coach must ask, because there's 3 very basic questions that seem simple, but coaches don't think to ask them as they're launching their business. And those 3 questions can save a lot of time and heartache, and they're really designed to, without, I don't want to give away 3 questions or nobody will sign up, but yeah, they're really designed to find out your why you're a coach, and a lot of cool things there with what we talked about with niches and everything else. That's going to make it much easier to be a coach. So I'd love to see anybody download that and get your feedback if it's helped you, because I think it will help a lot of coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's naturalborncoaches.com.
That's right. Yeah, not natural born killers, natural born coaches. So.
Right. Marc, thank you for your time, and have a great day.
Thanks, Joel.
Hey Startup Dads, take the next step right now and download your free guide called 9 Apps Every Startup Dad Should Have in His Toolbox. It's only available at startupdadhq.com/free gift. Again, that's startupdadhq.com/free gift. So go download it now, and we'll see you next time on Startup Dad HQ.